Hi, welcome to our latest bonus chat. This is from our pod recording looking back over the Ireland v Argentina test. If you missed it, you'll find it on Apple, Spotify, and all the other usual places. This week, since there's been a lot of recent chat about our particular parts of the Irish test coaching setup, I thought maybe we could take a broader look at it. I mean, who better to pass judgment on the respective brains trust for the national team and the provinces than the three of us with our vast combined knowledge of coaching? I mean, you don't need me to tell you I'm being sarcastic, but then again, we pass judgment on the players and referees all the time, so why shouldn't the coaches get off scot-free? Seriously, though, with Andy Farrell soon to take on the Lions role, what do we make of the team he leaves behind, the coaching team he leaves behind, and who might be decent candidates to join them in the near future? Starting with yourself, Hugo.
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, you know, a couple of bad games does not mean that Andy Farrell and his coaching team have suddenly become poor overnight. I think Andy Farrell has deserved more than the benefit of the doubt for our performances over the last few years. I am disappointed that he is going off to the Lions. Obviously, a great personal honor for him. I would really rather he not be going. But I'm not too worried about Simon Easterby taking over, actually. I think he is the defense coach, and that bit has been working incredibly well. He showed on the Emerging Ireland tour that he's capable of getting big performances out of players. Obviously, the kind of caliber of opposition is going to be very different, but I'm not too worried about him taking over, and he's been in that setup a long time. He knows the score. I'm relatively confident on that one. I think the two kind of members of the coaching staff have maybe come in for a bit more criticism recently. Andrew Goodman, obviously, kind of having just taken over, and I think probably I saw his name in particular. You looked at kind of some of the social media reaction after the game, and his name came up quite a lot. I have to say I'm kind of I'm going to slightly defend Goodman. I think Leinster's attack did suffer last year. I think that was slightly not his fault in the sense that we were betting in a new defensive system. The focus was there, and the focus clearly was not on the attack. I think there's at the very least a mitigating circumstance. The year before. Our attack had been very good, so you kind of can't give him, you can't criticize him for the one without giving him credit for the other. I also think that he's been in the Ireland job for a very short time. And that, frankly, our attack was not looking too sharp by the tail end of the Six Nations either. Anyone who watched that Scotland game where we kind of seemingly were on their line for most of the game and didn't come away with many points at all. This is a problem that predates Goodman, and I don't think the kind of full blame can be put on him. I'm kind of at the very least in the camp of let's see how he does for a little bit longer. The one I'm actually more concerned about is Paul O'Connell. I the line out is so critical to the way we play. Our whole game plan is built around kind of taking those chances. We saw it in the World Cup. Don't take the points, go to the corner. If you're going to do that, the line out has to work. And our line out has not been working for a long enough time now that you can't just write it off as a kind of temporary issue. The man is a kind of a legend of the game. And certainly, kind of theoretically, no one you'd want more telling you how to run a lineup, but it just hasn't been working. And I do kind of wonder whether his kind of legend status actually has slightly protected him from some criticism. But I do think, we need to start seeing results soon on this. It is a major issue. It wasn't great yesterday, albeit not quite as bad as the week before. It was very poor in the World Cup. It probably cost us a place in the World Cup semi-finals at the very least. And it was bad in the Six Nations. It's something that needs to get better soon. Hopefully we will see it. So I think there's things to work on. I think John Fogarty, scrum coach, the scrum is not an area of strength for Ireland, but I don't think it is necessarily his fault. It's an issue we're seeing in the provinces as well. It's an issue we're seeing at Leinster. So I kind of Goodman, I'd be inclined to give him a little bit more time. Connell, I think we need to start seeing changes soon.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's I mean, first of all, on Goodman, it kind of like when you look at the progress of this team under Farrell, he's had a lot of success, Grand Slam, all that stuff, a lot of big wins. But of course, that's going to get you noticed. You're in the top 5 in the world, and your style of play is going to become teams are going to have full playbooks on just your style and the way. So you do have to make changes. You're going to have to change things up now and a while. You can't just do the same thing. So you're going to expect a team to do something, things a little bit differently. Now they brought in Goodman, like you say, and that is a good point about what happened at Leinster, because they were betting in a defensive system. But if that's the case as well, you've got the reverse now with Ireland, because Ireland has the defensive system is set. We've seen it work really well over the past 2 weeks, but now we're trying to change the attack patterns as well. So it's you're gonna see that it's going to they do well to make that hit the ground running when your first match is against the All Blacks. So that was he probably has a bit of grace there. Yeah. Throughout the team, the forwards, Paul O'Connell. Yeah, that's true. It's the line out is something we need. The scrums, like you say, I think our goal in the scrums would be to reach some kind of a parity in kind of things. If we concede as many penalties as we win, I think that's not too bad, and that's pretty much what happened against Argentina. And so we had some horror stories going way back and in scrums where they've just been absolute nightmares from start to finish. So that's not really happening anymore. So that's going okay. And you do have to look at the coaches when this happens. I looked at the list of the Irish coaches staff, and you've named them all there. The list goes way down, and they're not all coaches. They've got, but it's interesting, all the names of the titles there. They've got 3 soft tissue therapists, I noticed as well, in the list on the RFU website. There's a whole list of names, a lot of people involved behind the scenes. That's just a side issue. But going back to the coaches, I think it's the, like you say, it's the progress in the different areas. And I suppose the question is who else would be out there and who we might bring in. What do you think of it all, Jay?
It's funny you mentioned, because I think it's the second soft tissue therapist that needs to go. Um, no, like, I mean, I think you've hit most of the things in the nail on the head there. I think I'd agree on the Andy Goodman side. I mean, if I was to think about this, the way Ireland seems to be operating, the kind of ground up side, is that I think if they seem to prefer appointments from within the IRFU system already. The coaches in the provinces are working for the IRFU already, so they're not provincially contracted. They're contracted through the IRFU, so it's not that big a jump for Andy Goodman to take off his blue shirt and put on a green shirt. And so from that makes sense to me. But like, looking at Leinster so far this season, one thing I've liked to see is the impact that Tyler Blayandall has had to Leinster's attack. So I'd be talking about two sides of my mouth if I wasn't looking at the guy who has left Leinster going to Ireland, and saying, I think that, I'm not saying it's a particularly bad move. Andy's a fantastic coach. He certainly seems more hand-on with attack defence than what we understand Leo Cullen's role is at Leinster. So maybe Andy could get far more out of Andrew. So and I'm not. I'm not saying the guy needs to go, right? By any stretch of the imagination. But if we think about the time frame that we were hiring that coach, we were number one in the world. We were one of the best, and all intents and purposes, sounds like that we're one of the best, financially rewarding unions to work for. Sorry, Wales. But like, I just feel like we could have had hitched our wagons to the stars in some of these appointments. I don't think there's any need for us to, not that I'm saying that it sounds bad saying settle, but I mean, why can't we go out and poach some rock star from the other side of the world in these cases? So that's why, like, to a certain extent, I would say Paul O'Connell is probably kind of in the same situation as Andy Kiriakou, say, at Munster, where things aren't going well, and things need to kind of step up quick. But on the scrum side, with all these changing kind of rules coming in, one thing I'm thinking of, as opposed to maybe not a full change in formal personnel, maybe bringing in a consultant ref like some of these other sides have. If it's not personnel, and I believe, so say the scrum issues, for example, if it's not personnel, which it doesn't seem to be, because as Hugo says, nearly all the provinces are being pinged for some of the same issues, and at some stage you don't have the horses. I mean, if you're not dropping Furlong and Porter at the top table, right? So maybe it's a case of changing the picture. Maybe it's a case of getting some far more detailed ref perception information in the lead up, or in terms of understanding these things more. This new protecting the runner situation. These things are changing all the time. So maybe having, we've seen it in a couple of unions now where they bring in a ref. So maybe that would be one kind of positive change to our coaching setup without actually changing any personnel. Maybe it's a pure addition rather than a substitution. But if I was in the same vein, if I would have to put a name down for maybe a change with the problems with the scrum, that seem to be a little better recently, but in the name of maybe not so much a better, coach, maybe a different coach to change the picture. Maybe looking to like a Georgian scrum coach or something. Some of these guys, like who was the guy who went to Sharks? Is it Giorgadze? From Georgia went to Sharks and totally changed didn't change personnel, just changed the picture. So it's one of those Achilles heels that, as Hugo says, you need a functioning scrum, or at least you need parity, which on some of our worst days we absolutely didn't have. But yeah, and more on the coach side, I suppose the last thing would be Easterby. I think has plenty of credit in the bank. I have zero concerns about Andy going off the Lions. I wish he wasn't, like Hugo said. But I think what would be really, really interesting, and a really interesting data point on how influential Andy is or has been, because we've heard, like, everyone has seen the Lions documentaries where he's getting lads to like run through brick walls for him, and seems to have a bit of a cult legendary status. But we'll get a pretty rare data point in terms of how integral he is to how this system works, because first up in the Six Nations under Easterby is England. So if that goes wrong, could we drop that game, which England could easily do what Argentina did to us 2 days ago, from a power game point of view, with very little problems. So if that goes wrong, the triple crown is gone, the slam's gone, and suddenly you're without Andy Farrell. So that's a trial by fire for Easterby. It'd be a pretty fascinating kind of indication to what maketh the man. I hope I don't have to find out that about Simon Easterby, but yeah, it'd be interesting. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the coaching situation at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's the appointments is the thing. I think it's interesting how they end up in the Irish system, because it's a kind of a unique situation. Obviously, on the one hand, you want to promote Irish coaches coming up, and you want to give them somewhere they can go. But there's only so many positions you can have. I mean, there's like maybe 3 or 4, the positions of the Irish team, the unit coaches, but then you obviously got 4 provinces. You've got an under 20s as well. So there is a bit of scope there, but on the other hand, like you also need to bring in talent from outside, and how do you bring them in when a lot of times you're going up against, maybe there's not so much Premiership money around anymore, but definitely the top 14 money. We don't have the financial power to bring them in, but sometimes we can say, well, listen, you come to us, we can offer you, maybe there'll be a head coach coming up in one of the provinces, or the offer this kind of a nod and a wink kind of to moving on, or things like that. I'm not sure exactly how it works. When we often compare ourselves to New Zealand, similar sized countries anyway, and but the way they work it is they're Super Rugby franchises. The coaches, when Super Rugby is over, the coaches come together, and if one team is doing something successfully, whatever, they kind of pool their knowledge, and it feeds into. But the calendar kind of works for them well that way. There's no overlapping of competition. Super Rugby is over, they go straight into the Rugby Championship, and they can feed the knowledge that way. We don't really have that. You talk about Andrew Goodman. He is like actively competing. His Irish team is competing against a Leinster team that we've seen play 6 matches so far this season. We've seen a new system, and that's going well. So before Ireland even kicked a ball this season, his attacking strategy was going to be almost pitted against that, where he came from. So it's a lot of pressure, but it's definitely good to talk about it anyway. And there are some issues there. There's coaches out there as well. Ronan O'Gara's name comes up every time there's any talk of any coach going on. Felix Jones is kind of out there in the wind as well. There's names going out there. You look at Munster, the Munster website. There's obviously they've no head coach at the moment, but they don't have anyone listed even as even taking it as a caretaker role at the moment. So there's definitely some scope there for some movement, but it's always an interesting talking point. But we do have to appreciate that it's not as simple as it's a wider issue as to what's going on with the coaches. We just can't simply just click our fingers and get in someone for whatever's going. But we're never going to stop having stuff to talk about it anyway. That's for sure.